There was a time when working for a big company meant something. It meant stability. It meant a pension. It meant your kids could go to the same school every year because you weren't going anywhere. And neither was the company. People wore the logo on their jacket and meant it. They retired with a gold watch and a handshake from someone who knew their name. That version of corporate America is dead, and the people who killed it are still running it. Let's talk about how we got here. How the most powerful companies on earth managed to lose the trust of the very people who built them. Because this didn't happen by accident. It happened one decision at a time, over decades, while everyone watched. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't one moment where everyone looked up and said, "We don't believe you anymore." It was a slow erosion. Decades of small decisions that each seemed justifiable in isolation, but added up to a single, unmistakable message. You are disposable, and we will never say it out loud. The story starts in the 1980s. Before that, the relationship between employer and employee was understood. You showed up, you worked hard, and the company took care of you. Not out of generosity, out of mutual agreement. Loyalty was a two-way street, and both sides benefited from keeping it paved. Your father worked at the same plant for 30 years. His father before him. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. It was a handshake that both parties honored. Then came the Shareholder Revolution. The idea, popularized by economist Milton Friedman, that a company's only true obligation was to its investors, not its workers, not its community, not the town it was built in, its shareholders. Wall Street embraced it overnight, and the entire philosophy of American business pivoted on a single premise: maximize returns, whatever the cost. If loyalty gets in the way of the quarterly number, loyalty loses. Pensions were the first casualty. Companies realized they could replace guaranteed retirement plans with 401k accounts and shift the entire burden of retirement onto the employee. They sold it as empowerment, choice, flexibility, control over your own future. What it actually was a transfer of risk. You were no longer retiring with a guarantee. You were retiring with a guess. And the company no longer owed you a single dollar after you stopped being useful to them. Millions of workers who had planned their entire lives around the promise of a pension watched that promise dissolve. They'd done everything right. Showed up on time for 25 years. Never missed a day. And the reward for that loyalty was a letter explaining that the plan had been restructured. That's the word they used. Restructured. As if breaking a promise sounds better when you dress it in business language. By the 1990s, layoffs became a strategy, not a last resort. Companies started cutting workers, not because they were failing, but because Wall Street rewarded them for it. Stock prices went up when headcount went down. Analysts smiled when the workforce shrank. And executives learned a simple, brutal equation. Fewer people equals lower costs, equals higher earnings per share, equals a bigger bonus in March. And so began the era of the layoff announcement, disguised as a press release. We are restructuring to better serve our customers. We are streamlining operations to position the company for future growth. We are making difficult but necessary changes. Translation: we are firing people so the stock price goes up and the people making the decision can buy a boat. This is where the trust started to crack. Not because companies were struggling and had to make hard choices. People understand that. Businesses go through rough patches. Sometimes cuts are real and necessary and painful for everyone involved. What people didn't understand was watching record profits reported on the same earnings call, that announced 10,000 layoffs. The math didn't add up. The company was making more money than it ever had. And somehow, you were the cost that needed cutting. Then came the executive compensation problem. And this one is hard to overstate. In 1965, the average CEO made about 20 times what the average worker earned. A meaningful gap, but comprehensible. You could look at the guy running the company and understand roughly why he made more. By the year 2000, that ratio was 376 to 1, 376 times more. Today, in some of the largest companies in the world, it's over 600 to 1, 600 times more. For running the same building, walking the same halls, eating in the same cafeteria, assuming the CEO eats in the cafeteria, which of course they don't. And the justification was always the same hollow sentence. We need to pay top dollar to attract top talent. As if the person working the register, or stocking the warehouse at 4 in the morning, or answering customer complaints for $14 an hour, wasn't talented. As if their work didn't count. As if the company could function without them. The cruelest part was always the timing. CEO pay packages were announced the same quarter as hiring freezes, stock buyback programs, where the company spends billions purchasing its own shares to inflate the stock price, ran alongside wage stagnation. The money existed. It was always there. There was never a shortage. It just wasn't allocated for you. Then came the offshoring wave. American companies discovered they could pay someone in another country a fraction of what they'd pay a domestic worker for the same job. Manufacturing left first. Entire factories packed up and moved to countries where labor laws were softer and wages were lower. Then customer service followed, then tech support, then software engineering, then accounting. Entire industries were hollowed out, piece by piece, in the name of efficiency. And every single time, the press release said the same thing. This decision was not made lightly. We remain deeply committed to our workforce, committed to their workforce, while literally shipping the work to a different continent. The words and the actions occupied different universes. Small towns built around a single factory watched their economies collapse in slow motion. Main streets went dark. Tax bases evaporated. Schools lost funding. Families that had lived in the same zip code for 3 generations had to move because the only employer within 50 miles decided that 50 miles wasn't far enough. They wanted 50,000 miles. And the company that left, their stock price went up 3% the week they announced the closure. Analysts called it a strategic realignment. The town called it the end, but offshoring was only the beginning. Automation came next. Machines replaced assembly lines. Algorithms replaced analysts. Self-checkout kiosks replaced cashiers. Software replaced clerks. And the narrative shifted again. Now it wasn't about cheaper labor in another country. It was about innovation and the future of work, and doing more with less. The future of work. That phrase gets used constantly by people whose own jobs are in no danger of disappearing. The CEO talking about embracing disruption isn't worried about being disrupted. The consultant recommending workforce reduction isn't including themselves in the reduction. It's always someone else's future that's being optimized. And here's where the trust gap became a canyon. Companies started using the language of empathy while executing the playbook of indifference. They hired chief people officers and director of employee experience roles. They built meditation rooms and nap pods and put kombucha on tap in the break room. They sent all staff emails about Mental Health Awareness Week. And they did all of this while simultaneously monitoring keystrokes, tracking mouse movements through productivity software, requiring return-to-office mandates that had nothing to do with collaboration and everything to do with justifying the commercial real estate lease. The messaging was, "We care about you as a whole person." The behavior was, "We are watching you type." The pandemic exposed all of it. In March 2020, the entire working world was sent home. And for 2 years, millions of people worked from their kitchens, their spare bedrooms, their couches, and proved conclusively, beyond any reasonable argument, that the office was optional. Productivity didn't collapse. Companies didn't fail. Many of them posted their best numbers in history. The workers who had been told for decades that they needed to be physically present in a specific building, at a specific desk, under fluorescent lights, from 9 to 5, proved that the requirement was never about the work. It was about visibility, about control, about a management philosophy that couldn't function without being able to see you sitting there. And when the pandemic ended, corporate America's response was remarkable in its stubbornness. Instead of acknowledging what had been proven by 2 years of real-world data, they demanded everyone come back. No discussion, no compromise, just mandates wrapped in buzzwords. Our culture requires in-person collaboration. Innovation happens when we're together. Sentences written by someone in a corner office with a door that closes and a view that no one else in the building has. The return-to-office fight revealed something deeper than a disagreement about where people should sit. It revealed that companies fundamentally did not trust their employees. Not really. Not ever. The entire infrastructure of corporate management, the time clocks, the badge scans, the open plan offices with no walls, the always-on Slack channels, was built on the foundational assumption that without direct observation, people will not work, that without a manager walking past your desk, nothing happens. And employees noticed. After decades of absorbing corporate rhetoric about trust, empowerment, autonomy, and bringing your whole self to work, they realized it was hollow. They noticed that the same company preaching "we're a family" would lay off the family without hesitation the moment quarterly numbers dipped by 2%. They noticed that unlimited PTO was a psychological trick. No accrued days meant no payout when you leave, and nobody actually takes unlimited time off because the culture punishes you for trying. They noticed that the values painted on the lobby wall had absolutely nothing to do with how decisions were actually made behind closed doors. This is the soil from which the Great Resignation grew. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't entitlement. It wasn't a generation that doesn't want to work. It was millions of people, all arriving at the same conclusion at roughly the same time. The deal is broken. Work hard, be loyal, climb the ladder, sacrifice your evenings and your weekends, and eventually the company will reward you. That deal hasn't been honored in 40 years. People just finally, collectively, stopped pretending it was still on the table. And corporate America's response was, predictably, breathtakingly tone-deaf. Instead of asking why people were leaving, they complained that nobody wants to work anymore. Instead of raising wages, they ran think pieces about declining work ethic. Instead of looking inward, they pointed outward. Instead of fixing the problem, they blamed the people who had the audacity to name it. Then came the tech layoffs, 2023, 2024, rolling into 2025. Companies that had spent years in a hiring frenzy, offering signing bonuses, fully remote work, free lunch, equity packages, wellness stipends, suddenly decided they had too many people. The same companies that couldn't hire fast enough 2 years ago now couldn't fire fast enough. And the numbers were staggering. 10,000 from one company, 12,000 from another, 18,000 from a company that had posted $8 billion in profit the previous quarter. Profit, not revenue. Profit. And they still cut 18,000 jobs and called it right sizing. The pattern was identical every time. A memo from the CEO that opened with, "This was an incredibly difficult decision." A paragraph about how much they valued the people being let go, as if admiration pays rent. A vague reference to macroeconomic headwinds that somehow only affected the employees and never the C-suite. And then, by market close, the stock price ticked up 2%, because Wall Street has never met a layoff it didn't reward. Some of these layoffs happened over email. Others happened in 15-minute Zoom calls, with an HR representative the employee had never seen before. People who had given 5, 10, 15 years of their life to a company found out they were gone through a calendar invitation titled Quick Chat that turned out to be the last conversation they'd ever have as an employee. No warning, no dignity, no face they recognized on the other end of the screen. Just a script being read by someone who would do it 40 more times that day. And the executives who authorized it all. They kept their jobs. They kept their bonuses. They kept their stock options. The people who made the strategic decisions that led to the overhiring in the first place, the ones who expanded too fast, who chased growth at all costs, who staffed up based on projections that were never realistic, they faced zero consequences. The people who just showed up, did the work, and trusted that the company had a plan paid the full price. This is the fundamental trust problem. It's not that companies make hard decisions. Every organization has to. It's that the consequences of those decisions are never distributed equally. The people at the top are insulated by golden parachutes and severance packages that could fund a small school district. The people at the bottom are given 2 weeks and a link to Cobra insurance. And everyone in the middle is one org restructure, away from finding out which category they really belong to. And now, in 2026, we're watching the next chapter unfold in real time. Artificial intelligence is being positioned as the greatest transformation of the workplace since the internet, and the language being used is hauntingly familiar. Oh, AI won't replace you. It will augment you. AI is a tool, not a threat. The future belongs to those who adapt. We've heard this before, word for word. We heard it about offshoring. We heard it about automation. We heard it about the gig economy. And every single time, the people who said, "Don't worry, this will make things better," were the ones who were least affected by the change. Companies are already quietly replacing roles with AI, not in some hypothetical future. Right now, today, customer service teams are being downsized as chatbots handle the volume. Content departments are being restructured as generative AI writes the copy. Data analysis that used to require a team of 5 now requires 1 person and a subscription. And the workers who are left are being asked to do twice as much because the headcount shrank, but the workload didn't. The playbook hasn't changed. The press releases say augmentation. The spreadsheets say reduction. The CEO says we're investing in our people. The budget tells a different story. And let's talk about what might be the most insulting development of the last decade, the corporate apology tour. Every few months, a company gets caught doing something indefensible, poisoning a water supply, covering up safety data, discriminating against employees, selling user data, and every time, the response follows the same choreographed script. First, deny. Then, when the evidence becomes undeniable, release a carefully worded statement expressing deep concern. Hire an outside firm to investigate. wait for the news cycle to move on. And if it doesn't move on, send the CEO out for an interview where they say, "We fell short of our values and we're committed to doing better." The same sentence, from the same playbook, from every company, every time. It's not an apology, it's a press strategy. And everyone knows it. Boeing told us their planes were safe, while internal documents showed engineers raising alarms that went unheard. Pharmaceutical companies told us their pricing was justified, while insulin cost more in America than anywhere else on the planet. Social media companies told us they were connecting the world, while their own research showed they were damaging an entire generation of teenagers. And when they got caught, the apology was always the same. The fine was always a fraction of the profit. And the behavior never actually changed. At some point, the pattern becomes the message. When a company apologizes for the same type of failure 3, 4, 5 times, it's not a mistake anymore. It's a business model with good PR. There's also something worth saying about the language itself. Corporate America has developed an entire vocabulary designed to make unpleasant things sound acceptable. Layoffs become workforce optimization. Pay cuts become compensation adjustments. Replacing humans with software becomes digital transformation. Surveillance becomes employee engagement analytics. The words are chosen specifically to remove the human being from the sentence, because it's harder to fire a person. It's much easier to eliminate a headcount. This sanitization of language isn't a small thing. It's how decisions that would sound monstrous in plain English get approved in conference rooms. Nobody would sign off on, "Let's fire 3,000 people to make the board happy." But we're executing a strategic headcount realignment to improve operational leverage. That gets a PowerPoint and a green light. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in a place where the average American worker has learned, through decades of lived experience and broken promises, that corporate trust is an oxymoron. That we value our employees is a line item in a PR strategy, not a guiding principle. That the relationship between company and worker has been stripped down to its most transactional form. You are useful until you are not. And when you are not, you will be discarded as efficiently as possible. And the tragic part, the genuinely heartbreaking part, is that it did not have to be this way. Companies could have shared profits when times were good. They could have kept pensions, or at least funded the alternatives properly. They could have invested in the communities they extracted wealth from. They could have paid fairly, promoted honestly, communicated transparently, and still turned a profit. The choice was always available. Every quarter, every board meeting, every earnings call, the option to do right by people was sitting on the table. They chose the stock price instead, every single time. The trust is gone, and the companies that spent decades destroying it are only now starting to feel the consequences. Recruitment is harder because people have options and memories. Retention is worse because loyalty requires reciprocity that was never offered. The best talent goes to smaller companies, or starts their own ventures, or opts out of the traditional workforce entirely. Quiet quitting isn't a trend or a hashtag. It's a perfectly rational response to a contract that only one side ever honored. Corporate America spent 50 years optimizing for shareholder value and systematically deprioritizing everything else. Its workers, its communities, its own credibility. And now its leaders sit in boardrooms, surrounded by consultants and dashboards, genuinely wondering why nobody believes them anymore. The answer was never complicated. It was never hidden.